My name is Huai. That year, when I was 18, the world seemed to be reduced to only two colors: the gray of the damp, moldy walls in my cramped apartment and the brilliant white of the pages I read under the lamp late at night. Life did not give me an easy start. Everything seemed to be against me. Each day was an endless battle. My family was poor, not the kind of poverty that leads to starvation, but a persistent kind of poverty that clung to my every dream, every plan. My dreams were often seen as fanciful. My mother, a hardworking woman with tired eyes, would often say, "Why dream of things so far away? Just get through the day." My father, a man of few words, would simply remain silent and nod. They didn't want to extinguish my hope. They were just afraid I would fall too hard. What they didn't know was that I had already fallen 1,000 times in my mind, but each time I picked myself up. I did everything to survive. Part-time jobs came one after another: construction assistant, server, flyer distributor. My hands were calloused, my back ached, and my legs were weary. Sometimes I would look at my peers, laughing in brightly lit cafes, riding scooters past me on the street. A bit of envy would creep in, but only for a moment before it turned into motivation. I knew my path had to be different. I didn't have the privilege of wasting time. Tiredness was a familiar feeling. It was no longer an enemy, but a companion, reminding me of what I was striving for. On some evenings, when my whole body was exhausted, I still managed to drag myself home. The streetlights had gone out, and the whole city was asleep. I would get to my small room, the pale yellow glow of the desk lamp my only friend. I would open my books, write notes, and try to absorb knowledge. Others could rest, but I knew another day had passed, and I still had to keep going in the right direction. But there was one thing I always held in my heart: I would not give up. It wasn't an empty slogan, but a vow to myself. Every morning, I would wake up before dawn. When the city was still sleeping, I would step outside, feel the cold air, and take a deep breath. The cold air would fill my lungs, and I'd tell myself, "Today, I will try harder than yesterday." My days passed like a repeating film. After the warmth of the sun began to peek out, I would be on an old, rickety bus, swaying and bumping. Unlike others who were dozing, I quietly watched the city wake up. Shops pulled up their shutters, sanitation workers cleaned up, and cars began to move on the roads. Everyone was in a hurry. Everyone had a purpose, and so did I. My first job of the day was serving at a small eatery on the outskirts. The owner was a middle-aged woman, her voice always gentle but her eyes incredibly strict. She taught me how to place bowls and plates without making noise, how to smile at customers no matter how tired I was, and how to say thank you with sincerity. She didn't pay much, but she gave me valuable lessons about kindness and patience. I learned that even in the most mundane of jobs, you can still find respect and meaning. I would often watch the regular customers. There was a construction worker who ate a large bowl of pho every day. He always bowed his head to thank me, his tired eyes shining with a warm light. Then there was a young girl who always ordered a glass of soy milk and sat quietly reading a book. She seemed elegant and had a world of her own. Everyone who came here had a story, and I was just an observer, a small part of the big picture of their lives. I wasn't envious. On the contrary, I felt comforted. No matter who they were or what job they did, everyone was fighting their own battles in their own way. In the afternoon, I would go to a convenience store where I helped organize goods and clean up. The owner was an old man who often told me stories about his life. He had lived through 2 wars and witnessed many changes. He taught me that life is not a straight line, but a maze with many turns. The important thing is not where you've been, but what you've learned on each step of the journey. The tired evenings seemed to be the biggest challenge. When everyone else was resting, when my body just wanted to give up, I still had to go to class. The street lights were faint, the late-night street vendors were crying out, and the cold air enveloped me. I walked, carrying an old backpack and a burning desire. I didn't know what the future held, but I believed in one thing: what I do today will create a different tomorrow. My room was only 10 square meters, but it was my own world. When the old wooden door closed, all the noise of life outside would fade away. This was where I faced myself, with my dreams and my fears. The room was nothing special: a single bed, a small desk with a pale yellow lamp, and a bookshelf full of old, faded textbooks. But to me, it was a fortress. Every night, I had to fight against my fatigue. There were times when I just wanted to drop my book, lie down, and fall asleep. My eyes were heavy, and every letter seemed to dance before me. The ticking of the clock in the quiet night was a constant reminder of the passing time. But I couldn't surrender. I knew that 1 hour of studying today would save me hundreds of hours of worry in the future. I would bite my hand to stay awake, make a strong cup of coffee, and continue turning the pages. I didn't just study what was taught in class. I also researched online, read old articles, and listened to other people's success stories. Each story was a small torch, illuminating the challenging path I was on. I learned how to write, how to communicate effectively, and how to solve problems. This knowledge wasn't in my textbooks, but it was essential for survival in the real world. One of my biggest challenges was the small voice in my head. It would whisper, "You're going to fail. You're not smart enough. You don't have innate talent." These words echoed in my mind, especially when I encountered difficulties. Once I sat trying to solve a math problem for 3 hours and still couldn't get it. Despair rose up, and I thought about giving up. But then I remembered the story of a scientist who had failed thousands of times before succeeding. I took a deep breath, pushed the frustration aside, and started over. In the end, when I found the solution, the feeling of victory was stronger than any fatigue. It reminded me that resilience isn't some extraordinary strength, but the ability to get back up every time you fall. The outside world might look at me and see only a poor boy, an ordinary person struggling. But they don't know that inside that 10 square meter room, there's a fire still smoldering, a fire of hope, of determination, and of a promise. A promise to myself that one day I will be the master of my own life, not a victim of my circumstances. My life was a relentless cycle of work, study, and sleep. But sometimes the cold winds didn't come from physical fatigue, but from words. One afternoon, while I was cleaning a table at the eatery, a regular customer named Tuan sat across from me. He was an office worker, always dressed neatly, and had an expensive phone in his hand. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and scorn. "Hey, kid, why do you keep doing these kinds of jobs?" he asked, his voice full of sarcasm. "It's tiring and a waste of time. Do you have any dreams, or will you just live like this forever?" Those words were like an invisible knife stabbing my heart. I was too used to physical exhaustion, but negative words were much sharper and more painful. Don't dream too far. You can't do it. Life requires you to be practical. Tuan's voice wasn't just his own, but the voice of countless people I had met, people who only saw the surface and judged. I just smiled, bowed my head, and cleaned. I didn't need to respond. I understood that my dream was too big for those who didn't share my path to see. They didn't live my life. They didn't carry my burden, and they had no right to judge me. I knew that every drop of sweat on my forehead, every sleepless night with my books, was a solid brick building my future. I learned to turn those words into motivation. Whenever a negative word echoed in my mind, I would remember the story of a blacksmith. He used fire to melt the metal and a hammer to forge sharp swords. Those words were the fire, the hammer blows forging my will. They didn't make me collapse. On the contrary, they made me stronger. That evening, sitting in my small room, I wrote in my old notebook, "Today, someone tried to extinguish the fire in my heart, but they don't know that this fire only burns brighter when a cold wind blows." I held no grudge. I just knew that no one would live my life for me. No one would make my dreams come true for me. So I continued. I worked, I studied, I took notes, I listened, and I learned how to turn fatigue into motivation. Time passed. My small efforts began to show results. A test score was higher, a small school project was successful, and an unexpected compliment from a teacher. These weren't great achievements, but they were like drops of cool water on the parched land in my heart. I began to see signs that I was on the right track, even if they were the smallest of changes. I learned to be patient with myself, not to rush, not to compare. Every day I acknowledged my small steps. I no longer worried too much about the road ahead, but focused on doing the best I could today. I learned that resilience isn't some extraordinary strength or an innate talent. It is simply the ability to get back up every time you fall, the persistence of a single drop of water that can wear down a boulder. Today, when I look back at that time, I realized that the tired days, the failures, and the long, lonely nights, all of them have become a part of me. They didn't extinguish me, but instead created the person I am now. The fire in my heart still burns, not brilliantly, but warmly enough to light the way, to remind me you can stumble, you can get tired, but never let the fire in your heart go out. That's a fire no one can take away.